The question that surely interests many fans, will Milla Jovovich appear in the new film? The actress became one of the biggest action stars of the 2000s thanks to Resident Evil. However, it is now too late for her to return to her biggest franchise, so even a cameo appearance by Milla is unlikely. The rest of the cast is still being assembled, but most likely, lesser-known actors will be chosen for roles to avoid inflating the budget. Additionally, it is known that the new Resident Evil will be a complete reboot, unrelated to all previous adaptations. It is probably hard to find a person who has never heard of Resident Evil. Resident Evil, as it is more commonly called, is known not only to gamers but also to those who watch the zombie epic with Milla Jovovich or other projects within this universe. Although the adaptations, to put it mildly, deviated from the source material, it seems that absolutely everyone understands the franchise's potential. Recently, it became known that we are awaiting another Resident Evil film, which will finally do everything right. But will Milla return in it? Will it be a full reboot? And which part of the game series will be adapted? We will break it all down in the next few minutes. Get comfortable because it will be, as always, interesting. Resident Evil began its journey as a film franchise in the distant 2002 with the release of the eponymous film by Paul Anderson. At the time, the director's project caused quite a stir, becoming one of the most notable game adaptations of its era, even though it had little in common with them. The Resident Evil of the 2000s immediately aimed for a more dynamic narrative. The first film, of course, resembled a horror, as the games do, but only in certain parts. Despite this, each subsequent installment drifted further from the source material and descended deeper into absurd action. Thus, the logical outcome was a gradual decline in ratings from both critics and audiences. Yet, the last installment in the series earned $300 million against a budget of $40 million, proving that interest in Resident Evil still exists. However, something urgently needed to change. Paul Anderson directed 6 Resident Evil films and collectively grossed over $1 billion at the box office, but his ideas were leading literally nowhere. Hence, the 2021 reboot attempt titled Welcome to Raccoon City was supposed to be a fresh start. For this, even iconic franchise characters were introduced, such as the Redfields, Jill Valentine, Wong, and Leon Kennedy. But the film barely broke even though it was much closer to the games and occasionally borrowed plot elements directly from them. However, it also failed to resonate with gamers and was criticized for practically everything. The most recent adaptation attempt ended on Netflix 3 years ago. The streaming giant ordered a series titled Resident Evil, aiming for a couple of seasons. However, it diverged so drastically from the games that it could have been named something else, which might have attracted a new audience. But the creators decided that being part of a major franchise was better than proving their worth from scratch. As a result, the project angered Resident Evil fans and generally performed poorly, quickly rebranding itself as a miniseries. And it seemed like this would be the end of adaptations, but not quite. Now it is Zach Cregger's turn to make his version of Resident Evil. The director of Barbarian will not only helm the new Resident Evil but also write its script. Moreover, Cregger has already presented his vision, and the first draft, after which several studios, including Netflix and WB, began vying for it. However, Sony proved to be the quickest, as it desperately needs a strong franchise after closing its Spider-Verse. Despite the fact that previous Resident Evil films mostly received scathing reviews from critics, they consistently turned a profit. Thus, it is no surprise that a real battle erupted over them. Even Welcome to Raccoon City was not a loss, despite the lukewarm audience reception. And Netflix's interest in the project only signals a desire to compensate for the tepid response to their previous attempt at a Resident Evil series. In the hands of a rising director who has proven himself in solid thrillers with elements of horror, the franchise might finally flourish. It is reported that Cregger's initial approach is described as more faithful to the original games and horror roots. The director himself has noted that he has been a fan of the game series for decades, so he perfectly understands what the new film should be like. In his drafts, he considered not only the demands of the fan community, but also made them suitable for a completely new audience. Producers of the upcoming reboot are also lavishly praising the finished draft, saying it will be appreciated by all fans. They also call the project one of the most important for Sony next year. Clearly, the company is betting big on Cregger, having invested a substantial $20 million for writing the script, directing, and producing. Such sums are usually paid to seasoned directors with extensive track records, but apparently, Cregger truly offered something extraordinary, and the studio is doing everything to keep him. Currently, the film is planned for release in theaters in September 2026, meaning just a year and a half from now. Considering the time needed for post-production and marketing campaigns, there is not much time left for filming, which must begin no later than this fall. Otherwise, Resident Evil might move to 2027. Right now, preparations are underway for filming, final tweaks are being made to the script, and the project is rapidly taking shape. Although plot details remain undisclosed, some information has already leaked. Specifically, there is news about the cast. Austin Abrams, whom fans of The Walking Dead will surely remember, will take part in the new Resident Evil adaptation. Given that he was announced first, he will likely land one of the central roles. Reports state he has not yet signed the contract, but it is only a matter of time. This time, the project will lean into the atmosphere of the original games in every way and avoid descending into mindless action. Presumably, the reboot will lead to numerous sequels, provided audiences warmly receive it. The upcoming Resident Evil is expected to finally showcase proper world building and competently adapt the game series after all the failed attempts. The main flaw of all previous films is that none were particularly scary. Perhaps the most memorable scene was the laser corridor in the first film. It was one of the few gripping and genuinely tense moments in the entire series, and it is precisely such scenes that the adaptations lacked. Due to the shift toward action, moviegoers formed a completely different perception of the franchise compared to gamers. Thus, the task for the creators of the new adaptation is to bridge this divide. Zach Cregger's candidacy truly promises much good. He has already demonstrated an understanding of the genre, where horror does not devolve into mere jump scares. Tension is built through atmosphere and unexpected plot twists. His Barbarian is precisely about that. The film can even be recommended to those who generally despise horror. Cregger will almost certainly steer Resident Evil away from the familiar action tropes toward atmospheric horror. While Milla performing acrobatic kicks at zombie dogs looks spectacular, it barely resembles the source material. Interestingly, there is already a rumor about which specific game Cregger adapted for his plot. If Anderson's works were a jumble of game ideas and characters, the new adaptation will follow the chronology more accurately. According to available information, the first film will adapt the less popular Resident Evil 0. This is a prequel to the main series, set a day before the events of the first game. In short, it tells how the Umbrella Corporation created the T-virus and what preceded it. There is room for experiments and various mutants beyond zombies. Fans of claustrophobic horror will surely appreciate the train episode. The prequel's finale led into the first game's events without featuring the franchise's main protagonists. The advantage of such an adaptation is its localized scope. There is no need to introduce an entire zombie metropolis or other unimaginable creatures. Although the plot features a giant mutated leech-human hybrid, even that can be reimagined. Overall, the film's atmosphere will likely resemble Barbarian, which Cregger handled successfully. In this sense, the direction for the new Resident Evil is more than fitting. If successful, a sequel could unfold in the iconic mansion, staying within the bounds of horror. And it would already feature heroes familiar to game fans. Of course, all this should be taken with caution for now, but if the rumor is true, the director has chosen the ideal entry for adaptation. It is closely tied to the original games without retelling their events. Given that the game was released nearly 30 years ago, many missed it, and the re-release failed to gain traction due to outdated mechanics, the prequel's plot will be original content for most, which works in the creator's favor. Overall, expectations for the new Resident Evil are not overblown, but there is potential for a quality project. It would be great for the franchise to find its proper form on screen and expand and grow. However, when it comes to casting the series' main heroes, questions will arise, but that moment is still years away. For now, we wait with bated breath to see what Zach Cregger has in store for us. Subscribe to discover new dimensions of your favorite movies and dive into the fascinating world of cinema with us. What do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments and give this video a thumbs up or thumbs down. Subscribe to discover new dimensions of your favorite movies and dive into the fascinating world of cinema with us.